Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're inviting you to step back a bit and think about um, the hidden patterns, the ones that govern pretty much everything around us.
Yeah, from the tiniest cell in your body, maybe, to the huge city you live in.
Right, and even, the way our own lives play out.
It's really about spotting these deep, often unseen forces shaping our world. We're talking about these universal laws: growth, innovation, sustainability, even the pace of life itself.
Exactly. And we're drawing from some fascinating material that uncovers these surprising connections. Now, scale, it sounds simple, maybe, but what is it about scale that makes it such a powerful way to look at all these different systems?
Well, that's what we want to unpack.
Our mission today is basically to pull out the most compelling ideas, the surprising facts, and importantly, the relatable real-life examples. Stuff that helps you understand these unseen forces. We want to show how these big scientific ideas actually connect to your daily life, maybe your health, even your relationships.
Okay, so let's dive in. Cities. We often just see buildings, roads.
Sure, the physical stuff.
But if you look deeper, cities are really the crucible of civilization. They're hubs for innovation, engines for creating wealth, magnets for creative people.
But there's a flip side, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. A very significant dark side. Cities are also where you find the most crime, pollution, poverty, disease concentrated. It's this dual nature.
That's fascinating. Humanity's best invention and also its biggest headache, in a way. So how does scale help us grasp that contradiction? And what always gets me is how resilient they are.
Oh, incredibly.
The material points out Hiroshima, Nagasaki, hit by atom bombs, utterly catastrophic events, and just 30 years later, thriving cities again.
It's astonishing. It's so hard to actually kill a city. Unlike, say, a single organism or even a company. Most companies eventually die, right? But cities, they persist.
What makes them so tough?
That's where scale comes in, as the key lens. It's about looking at how things change with size, what are the fundamental rules they follow, and when you use that lens, you see these amazing similarities.
Between things that seem totally different.
Exactly. Cities, companies, plants, animals, our own bodies. They're all, in a way, variations on a theme. They follow these systematic mathematical regularities. And that seems to be linked to their resilience.
Okay, let's talk about our bodies then. Scaling in biology. Have you ever stopped to think how much energy your body uses compared to, I don't know, your dog's?
Probably not in those exact terms. But there's this thing called Kleiber's law. It basically says larger animals are surprisingly more energy efficient.
More efficient? How does that work?
Well, take an elephant. It's maybe 10,000 times heavier than a rat, but it only needs about 1,000 times more energy to live, not 10,000 times more.
Whoa! So, wait, that means in elephant cells, they're working less hard.
Kinda, yeah. About 1/10 the rate of a rat's cells, on average. It's genuinely mind-blowing when you process that.
So hang on, my cells work less hard than my dog's cells.
That's the implication, yes. And if you had a horse, its cells would be working even less hard than yours. It's this amazing economy of scale as things get bigger.
And the deeper idea is that maybe this efficiency helps with longevity, less wear and tear.
That's part of the thinking, yes. Minimizing that internal damage over time seems key.
But there have to be limits, surely. You can't just scale things up forever. The material mentions the Godzilla problem.
Ah, yes. The Godzilla problem. Look, if you tried to build a creature like Godzilla out of the same biological materials as us, it just wouldn't work.
It would collapse.
It would collapse under its own weight. Simple physics. It's a powerful illustration of the physical constraints of scaling. You can't just assume everything grows linearly.
And that mistake, thinking linearly, that's not just for movie monsters, is it? It can be really dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. It's what the material calls the seductive trap of linear thinking. And there's a really stark example. Tusko the elephant.
Oh, the LSD story. That's grim.
It really is. Back in 1962, researchers wanted to give Tusko LSD. They needed to figure out the dose. So they took the dose known to be safe for cats, 0.1 milligrams per kilogram, and they just scaled it up linearly. Tusko weighed 3,000 kilograms, so they multiplied 0.1 by 3,000 and gave him 297 milligrams.
Which is how much compared to a human dose?
A typical human dose is less than 1/4 of a milligram. They gave him almost 300.
Oh my God, what happened?
It was horrific. Tusko trumpeted, collapsed almost immediately, went into severe seizures, status epilepticus, and died less than 2 hours later.
And the researchers concluded that elephants are just super sensitive.
That was their conclusion, yes.
Yeah.
Proportionally very sensitive to LSD. But the real issue was their naive linear scaling. Assuming dosage scaled simply by weight, it was a catastrophic failure of understanding scale.
And this isn't just some historical anecdote about elephants, is it? This has real implications for us.
Absolutely. It directly connects to how we dose medicines, especially for children. The author mentions his own concern years ago, finding baby Tylenol doses recommended on the bottle scaled linearly with weight.
Just like the Tusko error.
Pretty much. If the correct nonlinear scaling law had been used, based on the dose for a small baby, the dose for a larger baby should have been significantly less, maybe just over half what the linear recommendation suggested.
Wow. That really hits home, especially if you're a parent. You trust those labels, it shows how critical understanding these principles is for our health. Good intentions aren't enough.
Exactly. And think about BMI, body mass index.
Right, we hear about that all the time for health assessments.
Widely used. But its theoretical basis is also a bit murky, relying on this assumption that weight scales perfectly with a square of height, which often isn't how real bodies scale.
So even our basic health metrics might be based on flawed scaling assumptions. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What stands out to you, listening, about how we measure our own health? Are we maybe oversimplifying?
It's a great question. And this kind of critical thinking, questioning accepted ideas like BMI, actually has deep historical roots.
You mean like Galileo?
Precisely. Galileo challenged the self-evident facts of his time about how the universe worked based on observation. And what happened?
He got into huge trouble with the Inquisition, forced to recant, house arrest.
Exactly. Spent his last years under house arrest, went blind, all for insisting that scientific observation should trump ancient dogma.
It's a really sobering reminder.
It is. The material quotes something powerful here. Words written long ago, based on opinion, intuition, and prejudice, can so overwhelmingly outweigh scientific observational evidence. Sad to say, we are hardly free from such misguided thinking today.
That struggle between evidence and dogma still feels very relevant.
Deeply relevant.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's talk about something absolutely universal, life's finiteness, the second law of thermodynamics.
Entropy. The Grim Reaper, as the material calls it. Basically, everything tends towards disorder. Things break down. Wear and tear is always happening.
So these dissipative forces are constantly working against order.
Constantly. That's why we need energy food, just to maintain ourselves, to fight against that tendency towards decay. But ultimately, entropy wins for any individual system.
We're all subject to it.
We are. And this constant battle to get enough energy for growth, repair, just maintaining things, it gets harder as any system ages. Whether it's an organism, a company, a society, it's fundamental to aging, mortality, resilience, sustainability.
It's a pretty stark reality. But Steve Jobs had that really powerful way of framing it, didn't he?
He did. That quote about death being very likely the single best invention of life.
It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. It's challenging, but it reframes mortality in a, well, almost positive light.
It's a profound perspective. And despite that inevitability for individuals as a species, our longevity has shot up.
Dramatically, right. Average life expectancy has nearly doubled in the last century and a half.
Roughly, yes. From around 40 years old back in the mid-1800s to about 81 today in developed nations. And a huge part of that increase comes down to improvements in public health, sanitation.
Mostly happening in cities.
Largely driven by the infrastructure and organization possible in cities, yes.
And it does make you think about your own lifespan, doesn't it? The author shares that moment, finding out his projected life expectancy was almost 87, his wife's almost 88.
Yeah, that personal reflection. Hoping to see kids blossom, maybe grandkids.
And hilariously, hoping Tottenham Hotspur might finally win the Premier League.
Right. It brings those abstract statistics right down to a personal, emotional level. What does this extra time mean to us?
But then you have these outliers, like Jeanne Calment, who lived to 122.
The supercentenarian paradox. She ate loads of chocolate, smoked until she was 117. It kind of defies the simple platitudes about how to live long.
So while there are general rules of scaling and aging, individual variation is huge and complex. There's no magic formula.
Seems that way. And for most of us, the pattern is pretty clear. Aging involves a gradual decline. Vital organ function tends to decrease, roughly linearly, from our early 20s onwards.
Our physical peak is actually quite short-lived, isn't it?
Depressingly so, on average. That Bob Dylan line nails it. Not busy being born is busy dying. It's a stark way of putting it, but it captures that sense of continuous change after reaching maturity.
It definitely makes you reflect.
And on a practical level, the idea of caloric restriction comes up as a personal strategy someone might try.
Eating less to slow things down.
Theoretically, yes. Reducing food intake might lower the metabolic rate of your cells, reducing accumulated damage, potentially slowing aging. The author seems to find the theory compelling.
Interesting. Okay, let's zoom out again from the individual to the global. We live in an exponential world. What does that really mean? Because people throw that term around a lot.
They do, and often it just means really fast. But true exponential growth is specific. It means growth by a constant percentage rate over time, like compound interest.
It starts slow, but then...
But then the absolute amount of growth gets faster and faster. The doubling times get shorter, or stay constant while the amount doubling becomes huge. It's often really counterintuitive.
Like that classic chessboard story.
Exactly. The inventor asks the king for rice. 1 grain on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, doubling each time.
Seems modest at first.
Totally. The king agrees, probably thinks it's cheap, but by the time you get to the 64th square, the total amount of rice is astronomical, a pile bigger than Mount Everest. It bankrupts the kingdom. It shows the sheer, almost unbelievable power of compounding.
Or the lily pond parable. That one really sticks with me.
The bacteria doubling every minute, the pond full at noon.
And the question, when was it half full?
Right. And the answer isn't 11.30 or something. It's 11.59 a.m.
Just 1 minute before disaster, basically.
Exactly. For almost the entire time, the pond looks fine, practically empty. All the visible action happens right at the very end. It's a powerful, chilling analogy for resource depletion or environmental challenges. It creates a real sense of urgency.
And this exponential dynamic is central to what the material calls the Urbanocene.
Yes, this idea that we're living in an era defined by an exponentially expanding, urbanized, socioeconomic world. Cities are the main engines now.
That term Urbanocene, it's not just saying we live in cities, it's saying cities drive everything.
Pretty much how cities scale, how they grow, how they function. That's now the primary factor determining humanity's trajectory, for good and for ill.
It's hard to grasp how huge a shift that is from, say, a century or two ago. I imagine you have some personal perspective on this.
Well, the author shares some really vivid memories. Growing up in London's East End in the 1950s. He calls it a slum, talks about a Dickensian ambiance, especially in winter.
Wow.
Working as a laborer in old breweries, drinking ale from unclean pewter mugs. Even mentions his high school desk mate later became Britain's most wanted criminal.
That gives you a raw, personal sense of that historical urban reality. The dark side wasn't abstract.
Not at all. It really grounds the discussion in lived experience, makes you reflect on how far things have come, but also the persistent challenges.
And it connects back to Malthus, too, doesn't it? His worry about population outstripping resources.
Yes. Malthus was worried about hitting these finite time singularities, points of collapse where growth hits a hard limit. But the story since then has largely been one of innovation.
Finding ways around the limits.
Repeatedly, yes.
Yeah.
Innovation has allowed us to sort of reset the clock or push those singularities further away, at least so far.
So cities are these incredibly complex adaptive systems. You mentioned their genius is maximizing interaction.
That's a key idea. Cities thrive because they bring people together. And this leads to superlinear scaling for socioeconomic stuff.
Superlinear again. So double the people means more than double the innovation or wealth.
Exactly. Maybe 115% more, or even higher for certain things like patents or GDP per capita.
Yeah.
You get this disproportionate boost in creativity and economic activity. And the kicker is, cities often achieve this using less infrastructure and energy per person than if those same people were spread out.
That's the efficiency part. Less road per person, less wiring.
Right. It's a fascinating trade-off. More output, more ideas, but also more crime, more disease, all scaling superlinearly, but achieved with sublinear infrastructure needs.
And if cities maximize interaction, that relates to our personal networks too, the idea that you are your networks.
Definitely. Our social lives scale too.
Yeah.
There's Dunbar's number, the idea that we can only really maintain meaningful relationships with about 150 people.
And our truly close circle is much smaller.
Much smaller, typically around 5 people, family, closest friends. You can see that structure in your own life, right? That core group versus the wider circle.
Absolutely. It feels very relatable. Now, complex systems can behave in weird ways. The Millennium Bridge example.
The wobbling bridge. A perfect illustration of positive feedback or resonance in action. It opened, people started walking across.
And it started swaying.
Dangerously so. The rhythm of people's steps, even small variations, started to synchronize with the bridge's natural frequency. A small input caused a large, unexpected output.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What stands out to you about how small actions can snowball in complex systems? It's not always predictable.
Not at all. And that idea of feedback loops applies to human behavior too, sometimes uncomfortably.
Like the question, why do good people sometimes do bad things?
Exactly. The material links this to famous experiments like Milgram's on obedience to authority or Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment.
Those are quite disturbing studies.
They are, and they suggest that terrible actions often aren't just about inherently evil individuals. It's often about the situation, peer pressure, fear of rejection, conforming to authority within a group dynamic. Positive feedback loops in social behavior.
A profound and maybe unsettling insight into human nature.
It challenges simple narratives. On a completely different note, there's Marchetti's constant.
The travel time thing.
Yeah, this bizarrely consistent finding that across history, across cultures, people spend about 1 hour per day traveling, on average.
Even if they have nowhere specific to go, like the prison example.
Apparently so. Even people in prison for a life sentence walk around for 1 hour a day.
Yeah.
It seems to be this deep human constant, and it massively influences how we design cities and transportation and shapes your daily commute.
That's wild. And speaking of modern cities, we generate oceans of data now, right? Mobile phones tracking everything.
Huge amounts. It offers potentially amazing insights into how people interact, how cities function. There's that striking statistic, almost twice as many people have access to cell phones as they do to toilets.
That puts it in perspective. But there's a warning, too.
A strong caution against the naivete and even danger of relying only on big data without having solid theories or understanding the underlying mechanisms. Data needs context.
It's not just about numbers or infrastructure either. Some cities just seem to work better, like Silicon Valley.
Right. The material talks about San Jose, Silicon Valley's hub. Its success isn't just location or resources. There's something intangible in the culture and DNA that fosters innovation and success. A city's character or soul, perhaps.
Makes sense. Now, thinking about vital resources, water comes up.
A critical one. The example given is Santa Fe, New Mexico, where water costs are extremely high compared to other cities. Even desert cities like Phoenix or Las Vegas often have cheaper water due to historical water rights or massive infrastructure projects.
It really connects to your own daily water use and makes you think about scarcity.
And the potential for future conflict. The material suggests major conflicts may eventually be fought over its access and ownership. A sobering thought.
And there's that amazing comparison of there's like the city's water system and our own bodies.
Yeah, New York City's 6,500 miles of water pipes. It's vast, hierarchical. And then you think about your own circulatory system. All those arteries, veins, capillaries.
Because you lay them end to end.
They'd stretch from New York to LA and back again, apparently, all packed inside your body. Give you this incredible sense of wonder, both with human engineering and biological design. They follow similar network principles.
Amazing. Okay, one more concept before we move to the wrap-up. The rich get richer. Preferential enrichment.
Right. It's a core idea in network theory and economics. Basically, success breeds success. Nodes or entities that are already well-connected or successful tend to attract more connections or resources.
So successful companies attract the best talent, making them more successful, attracting even more talent.
Exactly that loop. And the author brings in that quote from the Gospel of Matthew, which is often misunderstood.
For everyone who has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him.
Sounds harsh, applied to wealth.
It does. But the crucial insight offered is that Jesus was likely talking about knowledge or understanding, not material possessions. Those who actively seek and use knowledge gain more, while those who don't risk losing even the little they have. It reframes the idea completely.
That's a real aha moment. Okay, so all this brings us to the accelerating pace of life. Things feel faster now, don't they?
Undeniably. And the author shares a fantastic personal story to illustrate this. His trip to Stanford back in 1961.
How long did that take? 10 days on a steamship across the Atlantic. Then another 4 days on a Greyhound bus across the entire U.S. 14 days total.
14 days. Compared to what, maybe 10 hours flying today?
Exactly. It's not that the distance changed. The time it takes to cross that distance has shrunk dramatically. You feel that acceleration in your own lifetime.
And the speed-up affects more than just travel. What about leisure time? Weren't we promised more of it with technology?
That was the prediction, wasn't it? More automation, more free time. But the material argues the IT revolution gave us something else instead.
What?
Compulsory games, things like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Platforms that are incredibly effective at capturing our attention. Addictive temptations that fill the time we might have gained, contributing to this feeling of accelerated social time. What stands out to you about how technology has changed your free time? Do you feel you have more, or is it just filled differently?
It's a great question. It feels like we're constantly scrambling.
Which leads to this Sisyphus analogy. The constant drive for economic growth puts us on an accelerating treadmill. We need faster and faster innovation just to keep things going, to avoid collapse or those finite time singularities.
Like Sisyphus pushing the rock uphill.
But harder. Because, as the author puts it, we have to push the rock up the mountain at an increasingly faster rate each time just to stay level. It highlights the monumental, maybe unsustainable challenge we face.
So where does that leave us? What's the big takeaway?
It points towards a grand challenge. The urgent need for what the material calls a grand unified theory of sustainability. We need to integrate our understanding of scaling across all these systems, organisms, cities, economies, if you're going to navigate the threats ahead.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, the goal was really to show you these hidden universal laws of scale, how they shape life, society.
And how, from biology right through to cities, quite simple underlying principles can lead to incredibly complex, sometimes beautiful, sometimes really challenging results.
We really hope it gives you a new lens to look through. And maybe you reflect on how these ideas show up in your own life. How does the pace of life actually feel to you? What patterns, what scaling effects do you see in your own city or community?
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. If elephant cells work less hard than rats, and if companies constantly need to die and be replaced by new innovation, what does that tell us about our relentless human pursuit of more?
About the long-term sustainability of how we're living on this accelerating planet.
Yeah. Is it even possible for us to consciously choose a different path? Could we slow down that treadmill somehow, live more harmoniously with these fundamental laws of scale? Something to ponder.